Let's get to it. Imagine coming home to a massive house you share with 8 roommates. You unlock the front door, walk inside, and the place is completely empty. Not just quiet, abandoned. But as you look closer, things don't make sense. Their belongings are shattered on the floor, the walls are violently scorched, and there is absolutely no forwarding address. You realize with a sudden sinking feeling in your stomach that you are the only one left. That is not a hypothetical scenario. That is the exact story of the human family tree. For millions of years, the Earth was crowded with at least 9 different human species. We weren't alone. We shared this rock with brilliant, diverse, and robust cousins. But today, there is only us. Mainstream history will tell you a comforting story that our species, Homo sapiens, simply outsmarted and outhunted the rest. But history is just what we write down. Forensic biology, on the other hand, is the crime scene left behind in the dirt, the bones, and the blood. And the forensic evidence tells a terrifying, explosive story of sudden cataclysms. Stick around for number 1 because it completely changes what scientists thought they knew about human survival, revealing a microscopic scar left behind by an entire species that was literally vaporized from existence. This is Oddly Explained, and today we are investigating the timeline glitches and biological cataclysms that wiped out our cousins. Number 7. Zambia, 1921. The skull that physics can't explain. Picture a mining operation in Central Africa. Workers cutting through ancient limestone stumble onto something that stops them cold. A skull staring up from the rock, almost perfectly preserved, the face still intact after 300,000 years. They call it the Broken Hill skull. Scientists call it Homo rhodiensis. For decades, it sat in a museum labeled as a curiosity of ancient human diversity. Then someone looked more carefully. At the left temple. There is a hole in this skull, perfectly round, approximately 8 millimeters across. The edges are smooth and slightly depressed inward. No cracking, no splintering around the entry point. And on the opposite side, the bone is shattered, fragmented from the inside out, radiating outward in a pattern that forensic specialists recognize instantly. That is an exit wound pattern. When a high-velocity projectile enters bone and transfers kinetic energy, the compression wave travels through the material faster than the bone can flex. The entry point is clean because the projectile punched through before the surrounding structure could react. The exit side explodes outward because the wave hits the far wall all at once. This is basic ballistic physics, documented in thousands of forensic cases. The textbook explanation is a spear point or a bone infection. But here's the physics problem. A spear delivers force over a relatively long contact window. The bone absorbs the energy progressively, which means it cracks, it splinters, it deforms. It does not punch a clean circular hole and exit. A dental abscess does not produce radial fracture patterns at the opposite temple. The physical evidence describes a high-velocity kinetic impact, the kind you achieve with a firearm. And this skull is 300,000 years old. Mainstream paleoanthropologists argue the hole could be explained by post-mortem geological pressure, a very narrow pointed tool, or bone disease. Some researchers disagree entirely. Anthony Peratt, a plasma physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory whose work spans both nuclear science and ancient phenomena, has noted that anomalous physical evidence in ancient contexts is often dismissed before adequate mechanical testing is conducted. The hole in Kabwe has never been formally tested against high-velocity impact modeling. It remains, officially, unexplained. And this was not the only ancient human dying in a way that modern science struggles to categorize, because on the other side of the planet, entire communities of our closest cousins were being buried alive. Not by Earth or time, but by the ceiling falling in on them. Number 6. Northern Iraq, 1957. The Neanderthals who never got out. A Kurdish shepherd leads archaeologist Ralph Selecki into the mouth of Shanidar Cave in the Zagros Mountains. Inside, under meters of accumulated sediment, they find them. The remains of at least 10 Neanderthal individuals. One had been so badly injured during his lifetime, a crushed right arm, a damaged eye socket, a healed leg fracture, that he must have been cared for by his community to have survived at all. Neanderthals, it turned out, looked after their injured. But several of the Shanidar individuals did not die of old age or gradual illness. They died under rock. The stratigraphic record around multiple Shanidar skeletons shows sudden, catastrophic ceiling collapse. Large limestone boulders fell directly onto the occupants. The force required to fracture adult Neanderthal femurs, bones which are measurably denser than modern human femurs, is estimated at several thousand newtons of compressive load delivered rapidly. These individuals were not trapped in a slow cave-in that could have fled. They were struck and buried in seconds. The conventional explanation is localized seismic activity, small regional tremors that weakened the cave ceiling over time until it gave way. This is plausible and probably partially correct, but the Shanidar individuals are not alone. Archaeological sites across Europe and Western Asia from roughly 40,000 to 28,000 years ago, the period of Neanderthal disappearance, show a statistically unusual concentration of catastrophic structural collapses at inhabited cave sites. Sites that Neanderthals had used for generations suddenly become uninhabitable at the same stratigraphic horizon. Some researchers in the field of archaeoseismology, the study of ancient earthquake damage, have raised the question of whether a large-scale seismic event, possibly triggered by extraterrestrial impact or rapid crustal displacement, could have produced synchronized cave collapses across a wide geographic area. This idea remains contested and sits outside the mainstream, but the physical pattern in the rock record is real. Neanderthals were not simply outcompeted for food by arriving Homo sapiens populations, as the old textbooks suggested. Some of them were physically destroyed by sudden environmental violence. And in Indonesia, roughly the same time period, something else was happening to something even stranger than Neanderthals. Number 5. Flores Island, Indonesia. The people who were entombed in fire. Imagine a species of humans roughly 1 meter tall. Their brains are roughly a third of the size of yours, yet they fashioned stone tools, hunted pygmy elephants, and survived on a remote island for at least hundreds of thousands of years, entirely cut off from the mainland. When researchers unearthed them in the Lianghua Cave in 2003, they could barely believe what they were looking at. Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, a completely separate branch of the human family that nobody knew existed. They were thriving on Flores Island for at least 60,000 years, and then at approximately 50,000 years ago, based on sediment dating at multiple sites on the island, they simply stop appearing in the fossil record. Their stone tools, their cut-marked bones, their hearth ash, present below a certain geological layer, absent above it. That layer is volcanic ash. A catastrophic eruption from one of the volcanoes in the Indonesian archipelago deposited a thick, dense layer of pyroclastic material across the Flores dig sites. The dating on this ash layer corresponds precisely to the disappearance of Homo floresiensis from the archaeological record. They were not gradually displaced. They were not slowly replaced. They were encased. The volcanic deposit acts as a seal. Below it, evidence of a functioning civilization of small humans going about their lives. Above it, silence. Volcanologists studying the Indonesian arc system have documented multiple large-scale eruption events in this period. The thermal pulse from a major pyroclastic flow reaches temperatures in excess of 700 degrees Celsius. Survival in the immediate zone is not a question of fitness or intelligence. It is simply not physically possible. The hobbits of Flores were killed by fire from the earth. And they were not the last human species to vanish in ways that seem less like natural selection and more like something being switched off. Stick around for number 1 because there is a species we have never found a single fossil of, and yet the evidence that they existed is literally inside your blood. Number 4. Sumatra, 74,000 years ago, the day the sky went dark. Take everything alive on Earth right now. The 8 billion of us, spread across every continent, every city, every remote settlement. Now imagine compressing the entire human species, every living person, into a single mid-sized city. That is roughly the number of humans left alive after Toba. The Toba supervolcano erupted approximately 74,000 years ago in what is now northern Sumatra. It was, by every geological metric, one of the largest eruptions in the last 2 million years. The ash field it deposited has been found in sediment cores from the Indian Ocean, from East Africa, from the Indian subcontinent, a continuous layer stretching across thousands of kilometers. The volume of material ejected is estimated at roughly 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash and sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide injected at stratospheric altitude reacts with water vapor to form sulfate aerosols. These aerosols reflect incoming solar radiation. The result is a measurable global cooling event, what researchers call a volcanic winter, that climate modeling suggests may have lasted between 6 and 10 years. Crop failure across the entire planet, megafaunal extinctions, and a genetic bottleneck in the human population so severe that mitochondrial DNA analysis suggests the entire surviving human population may have numbered between 3,000 and 10,000. To put that in concrete terms, there are more people currently in a mid-sized shopping mall than there were humans alive on the entire planet after Toba. Here is where the science community and alternative researchers part ways completely. Mainstream paleoclimatology attributes the bottleneck entirely to the volcanic winter disrupting food chains. Some alternative theorists, pointing to the unusual severity and speed of the collapse, argue that the ash distribution and the extinction patterns are more consistent with a deliberate or technologically assisted event, an ancient nuclear or energy-based exchange that triggered the eruption or compounded its effects. There is currently zero physical evidence for any ancient advanced civilization capable of such an act. There is also no physical explanation for why a volcanic eruption would produce ash distribution patterns some researchers find anomalous. Volcano or something far darker? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know which side of this you land on. What is not in debate is the result. Tens of thousands of years of human diversity effectively erased in a single generation. And during that same extended period of catastrophe and recovery, a species we once shared the planet with was quietly perfecting technology that should not have existed until they too were gone. Number 3. Denisova Cave, Siberia. The bracelet that should not exist. The Denisovans were not small or frail. Genetic reconstruction from their ancient DNA, extracted from a finger bone and 2 teeth found in Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains, suggests they were a large, robust human species, potentially even more physically imposing than Neanderthals. They interbred with both Neanderthals and early modern humans. They ranged across an enormous territory stretching from Siberia to Southeast Asia. For a significant portion of human prehistory, they were major players. In 2008, in the same layer that yielded the finger bone, archaeologists recovered a fragment of polished stone bracelet. The material is chlorite, a green metamorphic rock. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. The surface is polished to a degree that modern analysis has compared to contemporary jewelry standards. But the detail that keeps researchers up at night is the hole. The drilling hole in the Denisovan bracelet required a rotary tool capable of sustained high-speed rotation with consistent pressure and directional control. Experimental archaeologists attempting to replicate the hole using tools available in the Paleolithic, flint drill bits, bow drills, hand rotation techniques, have been unable to produce a hole with equivalent edge smoothness without cracking the stone. The chloride is brittle. A low-speed drill applying too much lateral pressure fractures the material immediately. To produce a clean-edged perforation in chloride without cracking it requires a drill speed that experimental replication suggests is significantly beyond what Paleolithic hand tools can achieve. The bracelet dates at least 50,000 years ago, with some analyses pushing closer to 65,000 years. The Denisovans had something, a technological capability or a manufacturing process that produced results we struggle to replicate with primitive methods. And then they vanished. Their extinction timeline overlaps with the same 50,000-year window that claimed the Flores hobbits. 2 separate human species, both demonstrating surprising levels of sophistication, both disappearing in the same geological epoch. Something was moving through the human family tree like a scythe, and the evidence it left behind is not subtle. In one case, it left a layer of burned rock and charred biological material visible from space. Number 2. North America, 12,900 years ago. The layer that ends everything. Archaeologists excavating sites associated with the Clovis people, the first well-documented human culture in the Americas, keep encountering a strange geological phenomenon. At sites from California to Carolinas, from Michigan to Mexico, there exists a dark, compressed horizon in the sediment column. Geologists call it the black mat. Below the mat, Clovis stone tools, mammoth bones, evidence of active human habitation. Above the mat, nothing. The Clovis culture disappears from the record as completely as if it had been erased. The black mat dates to approximately 12,900 years ago, the opening boundary of a period called the Younger Dryas, a sudden and severe return to near glacial conditions that lasted about 1,200 years. But it is what is inside the black mat that rewrote the scientific conversation. Beginning in the mid-2000s, researchers began reporting microscopic diamonds, nanodiamonds, embedded in the black mat layer at sites across multiple continents, not just in North America, in Europe, in the Middle East, in South America. A coordinated global horizon of nanodiamond-bearing sediment, all deposited at the same stratigraphic moment. Nanodiamonds are not produced by volcanism. They are not produced by normal geological processes. The pressures required to form nanodiamonds from carbon, estimated at several million pounds per square inch, delivered instantaneously, are consistent with one documented natural phenomenon: the shock wave from a large extraterrestrial impact or atmospheric airburst, the kind of explosion that converts ambient carbon into diamond in microseconds before the pressure wave dissipates. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, advanced by a growing team of researchers, including scientists from UC Santa Barbara, proposes that a fragmented comet or asteroid exploded above the North American ice sheet at 12,900 years ago, triggering wildfires, tsunamis, a rapid meltwater pulse that disrupted the Atlantic circulation, and the onset of the Younger Dryas cold period. The Clovis people and the megafauna they hunted were incinerated or starved in the immediate aftermath. This is not fringe science anymore. The nanodiamond evidence has been replicated at over 50 sites across 4 continents. Some researchers remain skeptical of the impact mechanism and favor climate-driven explanations for the Younger Dryas onset. The nanodiamond distribution, however, is a physical fact in the sediment record. Something happened at 12,900 years ago that was hot enough, fast enough, and energetic enough to leave diamonds in the dirt on 6 continents simultaneously. And yet, as catastrophic as that moment was, as completely as it erased the Clovis culture and the megafauna of North America, it is not the strangest piece of forensic evidence pointing toward a systematic, recurring destruction of human diversity. Because the strangest piece is not in the ground at all. It is in your DNA, and what it implies is something that should not be scientifically possible. Number 1, the payoff, the species that was completely vaporized from history. Imagine a human species, not a metaphor, an actual biological human species that lived, bred, and interacted with the ancestors of modern West Africans for a significant period of time, long enough and frequently enough to leave a measurable genetic signature, a signature that persists in modern populations today, detectable in the DNA of tens of millions of living people. Now tell me where their bones are. Beginning around 2020, population geneticists analyzing the genomes of present-day West African individuals identified a consistent signal, a block of DNA sequences that do not match any known human species. Not Homo sapiens, not Neanderthal, not Denisovan, not Homo heidelbergensis, not Homo erectus, not any archaic human whose genome has been partially reconstructed from fossil material. This genetic signature, found in populations including the Yoruba, the Mende, and others, has been traced through statistical modeling to a source population that diverged from the main human lineage roughly 360,000 years ago, meaning they were a distinct species, separate from us for hundreds of thousands of years. Then they interbred with our ancestors, probably within the last 50,000 years based on the way the signal degrades across generations, and they were close enough to us biologically to produce fertile offspring. Researchers have named them the ghost population because there is not a single fossil, not a tooth, not a fragment of jaw, not a hand bone, nothing. Every other archaic human species we know of, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo naledi, Homo luzoniensis, left physical remains. Bones preserve under the right conditions for millions of years. We have Neanderthal DNA from a 400,000-year-old femur. We have Homo erectus skulls over 1,000,000 years old. If the ghost population was alive and interbreeding with modern humans as recently as 50,000 years ago, in a region, sub-Saharan Africa, where the fossil record for that period is increasingly well documented, the statistical likelihood of zero preserved remains is vanishingly small. So where are they? The leading scientific explanation, offered cautiously by researchers like Arun Durvasula and Sriram Sankaraman, who originally characterized the signal, is that the fossil record for tropical Africa in this period is simply incomplete. Bone preservation in humid, acidic tropical soils is genuinely poor compared to the caves of Europe or the dry deposits of East Africa. It is possible, probable even, that ghost population remains exist but have not yet been found or have already decomposed beyond recovery. That is a reasonable scientific position. It is probably correct. But here is what makes forensic biologists pause. We have found Homo naledi remains, a primitive human species, in a nearly inaccessible cave system in South Africa under extraordinary conditions. We have found Homo luzoniens fragments in a Philippine cave that required both luck and persistence to access. The fossil record of human diversity in Africa and Southeast Asia has expanded dramatically in the last 2 decades, precisely because researchers are now looking. The ghost population's absence, as more sites are excavated and more sediment is analyzed, becomes statistically more remarkable with each passing year. And there is one more layer to this. The ghost population interbred with our ancestors, which means they were not some primitive, isolated subspecies living in remote forest margins. They were present enough, mobile enough, and compatible enough to encounter our ancestors repeatedly. Species that interact with modern humans leave traces everywhere, in garbage middens, in hearth sites, in butchered animal bones. The ghost population left none of those either. They exist in the blood of tens of millions of living people. They left a genetic record that survived 50,000 years of cellular replication, mutation, and drift, copied faithfully through 2,000 generations of living human beings. And they left nothing else. No skull, no tooth, no tool, no charred bone around a campfire. What does the forensic evidence actually say? Taken one at a time, each of these cases has a conventional explanation. The Kabwe skull had an infection or a narrow impact. The Shanidar Neanderthals died in a localized tremor. The hobbits suffocated under regional volcanic ash. Toba was an enormous but natural eruption. The Denisovan bracelet was made with techniques we haven't fully reconstructed. The Younger Dryas was climate change. The ghost population's bones are buried somewhere we haven't dug yet. Mainstream science is probably right about most of these individually, but step back and look at the pattern. 8 separate human species, all gone, all disappearing within a compressed window of geological time between 300,000 and 10,000 years ago, with a heavy cluster between 74,000 and 12,000 years ago. Each one leaving behind at least one piece of physical evidence that doesn't quite fit the conventional explanation. A skull with a ballistic wound pattern, a bracelet with a machined hole, a global diamond-bearing impact layer, and one species that left no physical evidence at all, only a molecular scar carried in human blood. The planet we live on was once shared. It was shared with beings who healed their injured, who made jewelry, who survived island isolation for hundreds of millennia. Something ended that world. What ended it is the question paleontology has been circling for a century without a complete answer. The bones in the ground are trying to tell us something. We just haven't learned to listen yet. If one of these cases unsettled you more than the others, drop it in the comments. And if you think the ghost population story is the one that genuinely changes how you think about human history, share this with someone who needs to hear it. This is the kind of mystery that deserves more eyes.